Before we begin tonight, I want you to think about the last time you drove somewhere unfamiliar after dark. The way the headlights only reach so far. The way the trees close in on either side of the road. The way your phone signal drops, one bar at a time, until there's nothing left. The way you pass a house, dark, abandoned, and something in the back of your brain tells you not to look. The Mercer family made that mistake on a Tuesday night in October. They're not missing. They made it home. But they won't talk about what they saw on the road. They won't talk about the farmhouse. They won't talk about what was standing in that window the fourth time they passed it. So I'll talk about it for them. This is the Hollow Road. Don't go anywhere. The Mercers were not the kind of family who believed in ghost stories. Daniel Mercer, 42, taught high school history in Roanoke. His wife, Claire, was a pediatric nurse who had seen enough real horror in her career that she had little patience for the manufactured kind. Their daughter, Maddie, was 15 and mostly interested in her phone. Their son, Owen, was 9, obsessed with dinosaurs, and had been asleep in the back seat for the last 2 hours. They were coming back from a birthday party in Abingdon. Claire's college roommate, a long drive, a good time, and now a dark mountain highway stretching out ahead of them on a Tuesday night in late October. The GPS said 1 hour and 40 minutes. Daniel didn't like that. He'd grown up in Wythe County, not far from here. He knew these mountains the way you know your own house in the dark. The shape of things, where the turns were, the way the elevation changed the air pressure in your ears. He didn't need a GPS to get home. He just needed the right road. "There's a cut-through," he said. "Old County Road, goes over Crow's Ridge, takes 20 minutes off the back end." Claire looked up from her book. "What road?" "Route 614, called the Hollow Road locally. I used to drive it in high school." She considered that. "How long since you drove it?" 20 years, give or take." "Daniel, it's fine. I know the road. The GPS just doesn't know about it because it's county maintained. Barely on the maps." Maddie looked up from her phone. "People in movies always say, 'I know a shortcut,' and then everyone dies." "People in movies also don't have to be at work at 7:30 in the morning," Daniel said. Claire looked at him for a long moment, then back at her book. "Fine, but if we're not through the ridge in 20 minutes, we go back." 20 minutes, Daniel agreed. He turned off the main highway at mile marker 41 onto a road that disappeared immediately into the tree line, like a mouth swallowing them whole. The Hollow Road was unpaved for the first quarter mile, not unusual for a county cut-through in rural southwest Virginia. But then the asphalt came back, cracked and buckled, with weeds growing up through the center line. The trees on either side were old growth, tall and dense, and they arched overhead so that the headlights hit the canopy and came back dim and diffused, like light underwater. Daniel's phone lost signal almost immediately. "GPS is out," Claire said. "Don't need it. Straight shot over the ridge, then it drops back down into the valley and hooks up with 11. How far? Maybe 8 miles? 10 at most." The car was quiet except for Owen's soft breathing in the back seat. Maddie had her forehead against the window, watching the dark tree line. The road climbed steadily, switchbacking twice, and Daniel felt the familiar pressure change in his ears as they gained elevation. Then Maddie said, "What's that?" They came around a bend, and the headlights swept across a farmhouse set maybe 40 yards back from the road in a flat clearing carved out of the hillside. Old wood, weathered gray. A covered porch with something, a rocking chair maybe, sitting dark on it. A barn behind it, with one wall leaning hard to the south like it had been pushed. A hand-painted sign near the road, too faded to read. No lights, no cars, no sign of life. "Old homestead," Daniel said. Been abandoned for years, I think. I remember it from when I was a kid. Creepy, Maddie said, and went back to her phone. Claire watched the house as they passed. Just for a moment, half a second maybe, she thought she saw movement in the upstairs window. A shape, dark against dark, pulling back from the glass. She said nothing. The road leveled out briefly, then began to climb again. They had been driving for 15 minutes when Daniel realized something was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not obviously wrong, just a quiet, creeping wrongness at the base of his skull. The kind that doesn't announce itself, that just settles in and waits. The road should have crested the ridge by now. He remembered the ridge. You came up through the switchbacks, hit a long, straight run through the laurel thickets near the top, and then the road tipped over and you could see the valley lights below. A handful of them, farmhouses and a gas station, small and warm and far away. He had pulled over on that straight stretch once, 20 years ago, and looked at the stars. He remembered that clearly. The road was still climbing. "How much farther?" Claire asked. "Should have crested by now," he said. He tried to keep his voice neutral. "Meaning what?" "Meaning we're almost there." He pressed the accelerator slightly. "Just took longer than I remembered." Another 2 minutes. Another bend. The trees thinned slightly and the road straightened, and Daniel felt a wash of relief. Here it was, the straight stretch near the ridgetop, and in a moment they'd see the valley. The headlights swept across the clearing. The farmhouse. Gray wood, covered porch, rocking chairs sitting dark and still. The leaning barn. The faded sign. Daniel's foot came off the accelerator without him deciding to. "That's," Claire started. "Yeah. That's the same house." "Yeah. We drove past that house already." "I know." He was very still. The road must loop. Some of these old county roads, they were laid out before proper surveying. They can... He trailed off because even to him it didn't make sense. He hadn't turned. He hadn't made any junction. The road had simply continued, and somehow they were back. He slowed to a stop in front of the farmhouse. The clearing was lit by the headlights. The porch was empty, he was sure of that now. It had just been shadows before, not a rocking chair, and the windows were all dark. All except one. The upstairs window, left of center. In it stood a figure. It was too dark to see clearly, tall by the proportion of the window frame, standing very still. Not moving, not reacting to the headlights, just standing there in that dark window, looking out at the road. "Daniel," Claire said quietly. "I see it." "What is it?" "Somebody lives there." "The house is abandoned." "Somebody, a squatter maybe, somebody lives there, that's all." He put the car back in drive. "We keep going." He looked in the rearview mirror as they drove on. The figure in the window didn't move. It stood there, watching them go until the trees swallowed the house and the road curved away. Maddie, to his relief, had fallen asleep against the door. Owen hadn't stirred. He and Claire drove in silence. 10 minutes later, they passed the farmhouse again. Daniel didn't slow down this time. He gripped the wheel and drove past at 35 miles an hour and stared straight ahead. And Claire did the same, and neither of them said a word until it was behind them. Then Claire said, "Turn around." "We can't turn around." "We have to." "If we turn around," he said carefully, "we go back the way we came, and if the road is doing what it seems to be doing, turning around doesn't help. We have to go forward." "The road isn't going anything, Daniel. Roads don't loop. We're missing a turn." "There are no turns." "There has to be." "I have been watching," he said, and his voice came out harder than he meant it to. "I have been watching every inch of this road. There are no side roads, no junctions, no driveways. The road goes in one direction and we follow it, and it brings us back to that house." Silence. Then, quietly, what was in the window?" He said nothing. "Daniel, what was in the window that second time?" He had seen it. He wasn't sure he wanted to describe what he'd seen. The figure had been different. Not in position, the same upright, still, watching posture, but it had seemed shorter, or maybe closer to the glass, and there had been something about the way it held itself, the proportion of the arms, the angle of the head, that had made the word child surface in his brain before he could stop it. "Someone was in the window," he said, standing there, looking out. "Same person?" "I don't know." Claire turned to look out her window at the passing tree line, and he could see her running through it the way she ran through difficult things, methodically, practically, not letting emotion into it until she had a plan. "Okay," she said finally. "We keep going. If we see the house a third time, we stop and I'll get out and knock on the door and ask for directions." "You're not getting out of the car." "Somebody lives there. Somebody who knows this road. We need directions." "Claire." "Daniel." Her voice was steady and flat. "We have been on this road for 35 minutes. We should have been through the ridge in 10. Our children are in this car. Someone in that house knows how to get off this road, and I am going to ask them." He didn't have an answer for that. He drove. Behind them, very faintly, Owen murmured in his sleep. Something that might have been a name. Something that might have been a question. Neither of them turned to look. The third time they came around the bend, Daniel was prepared. He had his window down despite the October cold, and he slowed the car to a crawl as the clearing opened up and the headlights found the farmhouse again. He stopped the car in the road. The house looked the same. The barn leaned its same slow lean. The porch was the same empty porch. He looked at the upstairs window. His hands tightened on the wheel. There were two figures now. The first stood in the same position as before, tall, upright, centered in the window, but off to its left, slightly behind it, was a second shape, lower, child height, pressed close to the first, the way a child presses close to a parent. And even from the road, even at this distance, in this dark, Daniel could see, or felt he could see, felt it in the fine hairs along his forearms and the sudden hollow space behind his sternum, that the smaller shape was moving. Not moving toward the window, not gesturing, pointing at the car. "Claire," he said, "I've changed my mind about stopping." She had been looking too. "Good," she said. She said it very quietly. He drove past without accelerating, without making any sudden movement, the same instinct you had near something large and dangerous in the wild. Don't run, don't startle it, just keep moving steadily away. He watched the house in the rearview mirror. The two figures stood in the window. They didn't move, they watched the car go. "Okay," Claire said, once the house was out of sight. "We are not stopping, we are not turning around. We drive and we keep driving and we get off this road." "Agreed. And you're going to tell me right now everything you know about this road, because there's something you're not telling me." He had known this was coming. "I heard stories when I was in high school. The hollow road. Kids called it that because there's a particular kind of hollow here, the way the ridgeline cups the valley. The locals said things echoed strangely, said sounds came back wrong. There was an old family that lived up here, farther back from the road that everyone kept clear of. Hargrove, I think, or Hargrow. I never knew them." "What did people say about them?" "Just that they were old mountain folk, isolated, that they'd been up here since before the county road was put in, and they didn't take kindly to traffic. There were stories, kid stories, about people who drove the hollow road at night and didn't come out." "Daniel!" He said nothing. "You drove it in high school. Did you ever drive it at night?" The silence stretched out. "No," he said. Claire looked straight ahead at the headlight tunnel of the road. "Okay," she said again. "Okay." In the back seat, Owen stirred. "Dad?" "Hey, bud. Go back to sleep." "Where are we?" "Just the mountains. Almost home." A pause. Then, there was a lady outside the window. Both of them went very still. "I'm sorry?" Claire said carefully. "While I was sleeping, I woke up for a second. There was a lady standing outside my window, by the car. She was smiling at me." "Owen," Daniel said, "we haven't stopped. The car hasn't stopped." "I know. That's why it was weird. You said we weren't stopping." A yawn. "She was just walking along beside us. She was smiling." He paused. "She had really long fingers." Then he was asleep again, his breathing soft and even, completely peaceful. Daniel drove faster. They saw the farmhouse a fourth time, exactly 40 minutes after they'd first passed it. By now, Maddie was awake. She had woken up about 5 minutes earlier, disoriented, asking why they were still in the mountains, and Claire had told her, briefly, carefully, that they were having some trouble with the road and were working on getting out. Maddie had looked at her mother's face and understood, the way teenagers understand when the adults around them are frightened, and she had not asked more questions. She had sat very upright in her seat and looked at her phone. No signal, no maps, no anything. And then she had looked out the window and watched the road. When the farmhouse came into view, all four of them were looking at it. Daniel stopped the car. He didn't mean to. His foot just found the brake and held it, and the car sat idling in the road with the headlights bathing the clearing in flat white light. There were 4 figures in the window now, one for each of them. The tall one from the first time, still, patient, centered. The small one from the third time, still pointing, though now it seemed to be pointing not at the car, but up, at something above the car, in the tree canopy or the dark sky. A third figure, medium height, that Daniel hadn't noticed building up to this moment, but that seemed to have been there since the second pass, standing behind the others. And now a fourth, the newest, pressed to the far right edge of the window frame, almost outside it, almost cropped out of view, with its face turned not toward the road, but toward the others, as if it was watching them watch the car, as if it was supervising. "Dad," Maddie said. Her voice was very small. "I see them. Why are there 4? He didn't answer. Then the window opened. Not quickly, not violently. It swung outward on old hinges, slow and deliberate, and the 4 figures remained perfectly still as it opened, as if they were accustomed to this, as if this were a ritual they had performed before. And the one in the center, the tall one, the first one, leaned forward slightly, just enough to put its face into the headlight wash. It had no face. Or rather, it had the suggestion of a face, the way a mask has the suggestion of a face, the right placement of features, the right proportions, but nothing that moved, nothing that lived behind the eyes. Pale, smooth, tilted slightly to one side. And then, in a voice that somehow reached them through the closed windows of the car, through the engine noise, through the distance, a voice that came less from outside and more from somewhere in the car, in the air itself, it spoke. It said, "You can park. There's room." Daniel put the car in drive, and he floored it. He drove at 60 miles an hour on a road that wasn't built for 60 miles an hour, and the car bucked and swayed on the cracked asphalt, and the headlights strobed through the tree canopy, and nobody spoke. He drove for 5 minutes, 7, 10. The road climbed and climbed, and he kept his foot down and watched the curve of the pavement and the headlights and waited for the bend that would bring them back to the farmhouse, the 4th figure in the window, the face that wasn't a face. It didn't come. The road crested. He felt it before he saw it, the pressure change, the slight descent of the pavement, the way the tree canopy suddenly pulled back, and then there were the valley lights below, a handful of them. Small and warm and far away, exactly as he remembered. He didn't slow down. He drove through the ridgetop and down the backside, and the trees fell away, and the road straightened and widened, and the pavement improved, and they dropped back into the valley. And he didn't stop until Route 11 was under the tires, and there was a gas station, lit, open, a single car at the pump, directly ahead of him. He pulled in and parked and turned the car off. The 4 of them sat in the silence. Then Owen said, conversationally, "Is there food?" Something between a laugh and a sob came out of Claire. She covered her mouth. Maddie was staring at her phone, which now had 4 bars of signal, and Daniel could see her hands shaking as she scrolled. He got out of the car and leaned against the hood in the cold October air and looked back at the ridge. From here, it was just a dark line against the slightly less dark sky, tree-furred and silent, exactly what it had always looked like from this valley. A mountain, an ordinary mountain with an old county road over it. The gas station attendant, a young man in a flannel shirt, came out to see if they needed help. He looked at Daniel's face and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "You come over the ridge." "Route 614, Daniel said. The attendant nodded slowly. "At night?" "Yeah." "People do that sometimes." He looked at the mountain line. "Usually they come out okay." "Usually," Daniel said. "The old road does something at night. Nobody who grew up here goes on it after dark." He said it the way you'd describe weather, matter-of-factly, no drama in it because it wasn't dramatic to him. "How many times did you pass the house?" Daniel looked at him. 4. The attendant was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's the most I've heard of. Most people get out on 2 or 3. He paused. "Did the window open?" "Yes." "Did it talk to you?" "Yes." The attendant nodded. He looked at the mountain. Then he looked back at Daniel and said simply, "You got out." As if that were the whole story, as if that were the only part that mattered. "We got out," Daniel agreed. He went back inside to his family. He didn't look at the mountain again. The Mercers never talked about it publicly. Daniel made some inquiries, quietly, over the following weeks. The Hargrove family, the name he'd half remembered, had indeed lived on Crow's Ridge for generations, since the 1800s, according to county records. The homestead had been declared abandoned in 1987, when the last known family member, a woman named Ethel Hargrove, had died at age 91. The farmhouse had been on the county's demolition list for 30 years, but somehow it kept getting deferred. Nobody would take the contract to tear it down. The county road, Route 614, the Hollow Road, was technically still open, but if you pulled the traffic data, you found something interesting. No cars had been recorded on it by the county's automated road sensors in over 2 years. The sensors weren't broken. They logged everything on every other county road, right on schedule. Just not 614. Just not the Hollow Road. As if nothing was using it, or as if whatever was using it wasn't something the sensors were designed to count. Owen, for his part, never mentioned the woman outside his window again. Not to his parents, not to his sister. As far as anyone could tell, he'd forgotten it by morning, the way children forget dreams, completely, cleanly, as if the memory had simply been erased. Maddie didn't forget. She sleeps with the blinds closed now. She doesn't like to see the dark outside her window. She says she's not afraid of what she saw in that farmhouse. She's afraid of what she saw when her father floored it on the way out, in that last fraction of a second before the road crested the ridge, and she looked back through the rear window. She saw the farmhouse one more time, a 5th time, closer than it had ever been, as if the house had moved to the edge of the road, as if it had followed them. And in the window, all 4 figures, still, watching. But there was a 5th now, small, pressed to the glass, both hands flat on the window, the way you press against glass when you want to see through it. Wearing what looked very much like the same jacket she had on that night. Route 614 is still on the county maps. You can find it if you look. A thin, gray line over the ridge, barely labeled, branching off the main highway at mile marker 41. It looks like nothing. It looks like a shortcut. The locals don't use it. They haven't used it for a long, long time. And if you ask them about it, If you catch the right person at the right gas station on the right cold October night, they'll answer you the same way. They'll say, "You can go over the ridge. People do it sometimes." They'll say, "Most of them come out okay." And then they'll look at the mountain and stop talking. That's all. That's the whole story. Go check your windows. If you want more stories from the deep woods, from the hollows and the ridgelines, and the places the maps don't quite cover, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because we go dark in here every week. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been on a road that didn't behave the way a road should? I read every one. And be careful out there. The shortcuts aren't always worth it.